with the scent of potpourri, films we commit to memory. Crossing the felt ropes, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.
Hello and welcome to the Obsessive Viewer podcast, and welcome to 2025. We're a weekly podcast that reviews one or two new release titles every episode with an occasional free-for-all segment at the end that we call Potpourri. You can find more of our work, including my written reviews, full episode show notes, and the complete backlog of our episodes at obsessiveviewer.com. You can also write into the show by emailing me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. And if you'd like to support us and get access to hundreds of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, where you can get access to content at any of our tier levels on a recurring monthly subscription basis, or you can buy individual collections a la carte in the Patreon shop section. So, recently on Patreon, I released a Patreon exclusive episode of Obsessive Viewer where I reviewed Carry On and Hot Frosty. I released that on Christmas Eve, and that is available to both paid and free members on Patreon. So that's only going to be available on Patreon. So go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, sign up as either a paid member or just a free member and get access to that episode. Other things on Patreon, next week's episode of Obsessive Viewer is already up on Patreon for Patreon supporters, paid members. In that, I'm reviewing Better Man and September 5 with guest Nick Rogers. And other stuff this week on Patreon. Monthly wrap-ups are back, so by the time you guys are listening to this, my monthly wrap-up episode for December 2024 will be up. Those are exclusive to $10 patrons. Basically, I just run down the movies I watch each month, and I'm making a resurgence, making a comeback with those in 2025. Also, I have podcast and writing stats episode available to all paid members, where I also talk about my honorable mentions for the year. That comes out on Friday. And finally, Severance Season 2 episode reviews will be starting on Patreon. Each episode I'm reviewing, that starts on January 17th. Once again, you can sign up on Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer for all of that and a bunch more content. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and you can find me on social media, which includes Letterboxd at the username of obsessiveviewer. And later in the show, I'll be reviewing the new movie from Bodies, Bodies director Halina Reijn, Babygirl. But before that, we'll be going over some movie plans for 2025, and then we'll review the new Robert Eggers horror film, Nosferatu, in this week's feature review. And joining me tonight, waiting patiently for me to stop my rambling and to help kick off 2025 on the Obsessive Viewer podcast, is my friend and IFGA colleague, whose work can be found at oddtrilogies.com, and he can also be followed on Letterboxd at the handle of Dandible, which is Mandible with a D. It's Andy Carr. Welcome back to the show, Andy. How's it going? And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. I'm grateful and excited to be back so soon.
Yes.
And to be back right at the start of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I'm happy to wait patiently while you ramble about your output, because I'm just glad you have so much going on. I don't want to see the lights go out at Obsessive Viewer. So
thank you.
You know, I want you to be able to pay your rent.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, people, patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Shout out to Jason, who just signed up recently. I don't know if he listens to Obsessive Viewer or if he's just a tower junkie, but we'll see. But welcome to Patreon. And welcome back to the show, Andy. You mentioned being back so soon. You were on last week and you're on this week. And this is the second year in a row that you've done the last episode of the year and the first episode of the year. Yeah. So you were on last year. What was
our first episode of the year last year?
It was Aquaman. Yeah, it was
classic, the instant classic.
Yep. And then you were also on for Rebel Moon in that episode, right?
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense, because that came out like late December, I think.
Yep. Oh, interesting. I'm looking at the show notes for that. You also talked about in Potpourri, you talked about Shadow being in Sonic the Hedgehog 3. which is
and
interesting.
Now here we are, freshly
Exactly.
released Sonic 3.
Yes, the final movie that I saw in the theater in 2024.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah. So, speaking of final things in 2024, Andy, you and Logan have been hard at work at oddtrilogies.com. How's it going over there? For the listeners, you guys did, you finished out the year with an episode, The Rise of Eggers, which I haven't listened to yet, but I'm excited to. You also did the Harold and Kumar trilogy and the Venom trilogy with Evan Dossie, which I did listen to that episode, and it was great. I always love your guys' obvious perspective on things, but like getting a chance to hear Evan talk at length about his weird love of Venom is like fantastic.
Because his love affair with the Venom movies has kind of been a long standing, like, I don't know if it counts as a meme, if it's just his friends that know about it, but or people who read Midwest Film Journal, of course. But yeah, it was great to have him on, so he could just, he could have an unbridled hour and a half or two to just break it down for us and explain at us why the Venom trilogy is the most cohesive superhero trilogy in the modern era.
And it's such a compelling argument too.
It's like, even if you don't like those movies, it's hard to argue with the Eddie Venom relationship and Tom Hardy's commitment to that silliness. And yeah. So that was great. And that's been the best part, I think, of 2024 for Odd Trilogies, is having guests on and specifically, trying to find opportunities in the form of trilogies to talk about things that our friends and colleagues are passionate about. So, not just like, hey, does somebody want to be on this random trilogy, but like, we sought you out for the Kurosawa trilogy. We sought Evan out for Venom. We sought Nick Rogers out for Kevin Costner, because he's the biggest Costner head I know. And we just, it's really rewarding to do that and be able to engage with somebody who's that deep into it, deeper than either Logan or I are, even if we love it ourselves. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun. Nice. We just recorded, it's not out yet, should be out I think this weekend. Just recorded our kind of dueling top 10s that we do every year. It's our last episode, or our recap episode on the year, and I say my top 10, Logan says his top 10, and we kind of go back and forth there. And then here in a couple days, I will also be putting out my own little, I don't know, I call it a year in review, but less about like the best movies of the year. And since we do the top 10 already, and more just kind of like personally reflective about like my movie watching and my relationship with movies and writing about them and talking about them, and, kind of looking ahead to things I want to do with my 2025 when it comes to film.
That's awesome. I love that. I've been dragging my feet with posting my like top 10 and year in review stuff. I wanted to get it posted by December 30th, but I was just like, I had a goal. I set a goal for myself to watch a certain amount of movies last year, and I did achieve that goal. But I was like, I need to get this written, but I'm also like, I'm down like 3 or 4 movies I need to catch up. So I'm going to get that posted on Obsessive Viewer soon enough. But in the meantime, check out oddtrilogies.com for Andy's write-up. Will Logan have a write-up as well, or is it just going to be on
he on our top 10s episode, he discussed ambition to write kind of a sort of an expansion of recognizing movies, probably like his 11 through 20 movies that he couldn't fit onto a top 10 that he nevertheless loved and wants to gush about and recognize. So he'll have that coming out, and I'll have my little diary coming out. Perfect.
Well, I can't wait to I can't wait to sneak into your room and lift up your mattress and crack open that diary without you knowing. Can't wait. And we're going to talk a little bit about movies, obviously being a movie podcast. But before we get to that section, I do want to mention some stuff playing in indie here soon. feel free to skip over this if you're not in Indianapolis. So, first up, Alamo Drafthouse next week on January 6th, they're showing Mad Max Fury Road. And next Tuesday, they're showing Speed Racer. And then next Wednesday, they're showing A Clockwork Orange. And Tiny and I will be at a very late showing of Nosferatu on this Saturday too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I'm excited for that. It'll be my third time seeing that movie, which is kind of crazy. Yeah. Elsewhere in Indy at the Can, the AV Club screening of the Cat o' Nine Tails will be on Monday, January 6th. It's a giallo movie slasher from Dario Argento. Not familiar with it, but the premise is apparently I almost said robot. A reporter and a blind puzzle writer investigate a series of murders connected to a pharmaceutical company conducting secret genetic experiments, finding themselves targeted by the killer. So that is on Monday, January 6th. And on Wednesday, January 8th, presented by Common Cause and Stand Up Indiana, is a screening of the documentary Bad Faith, which exposes how Christian nationalism has become the most powerful anti-democratic force in America. And following the film, a panel will discuss how Hoosiers can work together to push back against this insidious assault on our democratic values. Again, that's on January 8th at the Can Theater. And then elsewhere in Indy, I'll run through these really quickly.
You're good.
Opening this Friday at Living Room Theaters is The Black Sea, All We Imagine as Light, and The Count of Monte Cristo. And then at Keystone Art, throughout January and February, they're doing a series for retro replay for Best Picture winners. So throughout January, I think it's every Tuesday in January, they're going to show Casablanca, The Sting, The Deer Hunter, and Driving Miss Daisy. And then rounding out movies in Indiana or whatever, Indianapolis, whatever circle I'm going to have here is Flicks Brew House on Tuesday, January 7th is going to show The Blues Brothers. So links, links to all the theaters and everything are in the show notes of this episode. And for everyone who isn't in Indianapolis, thank you for still listening. Any of those pique your interest, Andy?
I haven't seen the Blues Brothers in years. I mean, I watched that movie on repeat as a kid, but it's been probably at least 15 years since I've seen it, so half my life. So that would be intriguing to go see.
That would be.
I've also never seen Cat o' Nine Tails. I've seen a decent amount of Argento, I guess, but mostly kind of the big ones. And I never caught that one. So that would be a good one. You said that was at Alamo or Can?
That is at Can on January 6th. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's a good spot to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as you're not observing the January 6th holiday, Andy, your fond memories from.
Yes.
The Blues Brothers, interesting enough, I saw it once in 2015, and I remember just thinking like I didn't really get it. It kind of like Caddyshack. I think I'm just like I don't know. It's that
brand of humor. Yeah.
So maybe it's time for me to revisit it. I think all like now just about 10 years away from my first viewing of it. Maybe the stick will have been removed from my ass. So yeah.
Dig deep. Find it.
Yes. So that's a new Patreon tier. Okay. So yeah, that stuff out of the way. Instead of doing news before the reviews, before we get to the review of Nosferatu, I wanted to ask you a couple questions about your movie watching, to kind of spoil your diary, like write up that you're going to be doing. First up, just two questions. One is, are there any movie accomplishments that you're proud of from 2024? And I should qualify that with, aside from the 4 guest appearances you made on Obsessive Viewer last year.
Right. Career highlight right there.
Yes.
I don't. When I say, okay, so achievement to me often like that reads as like a completion of something. For me, 2024 was kind of a year of like new ongoing projects, if that makes sense, like starting new things, not necessarily finishing them, but like I'm excited, to have begun them. Obviously we launched our website, which will be ongoing forever as long as we can keep it up. But in terms of like movie watching, this was a big year for me for getting more into Japanese cinema, especially like classics and samurai films and things. My friend and I are about halfway through the Zatoichi series, which has been a lot of fun. I've watched a lot of Kurosawa for the first time, a lot of Tatsuya Nakadai films, Harakiri, saw that for the first time, changed my life. It's like one of my new favorite movies. And I've honestly, Japanese cinema has kind of dominated my 2024, which will continue in 2025. I also want to kind of finish out my sort of essential Westerns watch list that I made for myself. I've got like 15 more Westerns to watch, and I did watch Open Range this year with Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall, and that was excellent. That was basically recommended to me by Nick Rogers. And yeah, so a lot of the East and the West. So Eastern cinema and Westerns. And that's kind of, it's been fun to. I like giving myself little viewing projects, like trying to watch through a director's filmography or watching the highlights of a genre or something. Yeah. And so, it's 2024 has been a lot of starting down a lot of paths that I'm excited to continue on. Nice.
That's awesome. And it's, that's kind of influenced me a little bit to kind of do something sort of similar to kind of like my plan for this year is to fill some sci-fi gaps that I have. So my planned like first movie of 2025 that I haven't started yet is Metropolis from 1927 from Fritz Lang. And then from there, I'm gonna compile a list of like sci-fi movies that I haven't seen or I saw like long ago that I want to revisit, and just my plan is to kind of prioritize that and stifle a cough on the mic, and then but no, to kind of prioritize those, and then I want my last movie of 2025 to be whatever my favorite 2025 release sci-fi movie is. So that's the plan. So I'm looking forward to to December 31st watching 28 years later, because I have high hopes for that.
Yeah. I'm excited for that. I still haven't seen Years. Or not years, weeks. I haven't seen 28 Weeks Later, but I love 28 Days Later, so I'm looking forward to Years.
Yeah, 28 Days Later is one of my favorite movies, and 28 Weeks Later for how different and how much of a turn it is from the first one. Like it's really, really good. Like it holds up. Like it's really, really solid. I love those movies. I can't wait for this one. I'm so excited. So so aside from continuing your Japanese cinema odyssey, do you have any other like movie goals you've set for yourself for 2025, or any movies that you're excited about?
Well, it's kind of a writing goal as much as it is a watching goal. But part of this piece I want to write to kind of reflect on 2024 and usher in 2025 is sort of establishing a precedent to kind of journal my progress when I'm working my way through these projects. So like, say I watch 5 of my Western watch list in the span of a month, then I'll do a little piece kind of talking about those 5 movies and where I'm at with the genre. Same thing with Japanese films. And also I have been watching a lot of classic anime films. And so I'll probably kind of start doing little series entries on those. I don't know if I'll call them my movie diary or blind spotting or something, filling in my blind spots. That's kind of I log everything on Letterboxd, but kind of keeping a more comprehensive emotional log of the movies I watch that are important to me is something I want to do.
Nice. I like that a lot. That sounds really good. Nice.
Yeah.
That's somewhat similar to what I'm going to be doing on Patreon with my monthly wrap-ups, but it's more that I'm just excited that Letterboxd now has stats for lists, so I can just easily like compile that stuff for each month. So that's cool. Well, that's very exciting. Again, you can follow Andy's work at oddtrilogies.com and also follow him on a Letterboxd. Jesus. At Dandible. Links to all that are in the show notes of this episode. And what do you say, Andy? Should we get into our feature review for the evening of Nosferatu?
Let's suck it up and do it.
Nice. Let's thank you for coming to me with this. I don't know. So of course we're going to do a non-spoiler and spoiler review for Nosferatu. We're going to once we transition over to the spoiler section, I'll play a clip from the show notes. If you want to avoid that or want to navigate the episode, check the show notes for timestamps, and those timestamps are also available at obsessiveviewer.com/OV460. So to get us into the non-spoiler review, Nosferatu, according to IMDb, is a gothic tale of obsession between a haunted young woman and the terrifying vampire infatuated with her, causing untold horror in its wake. It is currently available in theaters. It was released on December 25th on Christmas. It's from director Robert Eggers. It is his fourth film after The Witch, The Lighthouse, and The Northman. Written by Robert Eggers, based on the original film by Henrik Galeen, and of course inspired by the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker. This film stars Lily Rose Depp, Nicholas Hoult, Bill Skarsgård, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Willem Dafoe, Emma Corrin, and Ralph Ineson. So, Andy, before we get to the actual review, what's your position on Robert Eggers, or what is like the... Do you want to give us a hint of what you said on your podcast so that people can go listen to the podcast?
Give a primer
to
entice people to listen to that. But yeah, I find Eggers to be kind of a fascinating figure in the film industry, just because, so he made his first movie less than 10 years ago. At least his first feature, less than 10 years ago, has only made 4 movies as of Nosferatu, and yet has kind of, immediately become this sort of, powerhouse, this fan favorite in the atmospheric horror / period film world. As soon as Robert Eggers' name is attached to something, everyone's locked into that. Everyone, it's this movie was a lot of people's most anticipated movie of the year. And I think there was some of that from The Witch. He definitely influenced horror hugely with The Witch, especially A24 horror.
Right.
But then The Lighthouse, I think, really cemented him as kind of this, in kind of a reductive way, he's kind of one of those directors, sort of like Chris Nolan, where everybody on Twitter says he can't miss, kind of thing,
right?
Which I don't mean as a dig at him. It's just, it's interesting to me how quickly and with how few films he has become this kind of unstoppable force, where I don't know that this is true, but it's almost like he's kind of a blank check director now. And so on top of that, on top of his interesting cultural place, I do find his kind of singular hold on period, thick period atmosphere and authenticity to be really interesting. There's just very few filmmakers consistently making movies set in vastly different times with incredibly detailed production design, and on top of that, gorgeous atmosphere. And so he is a unique voice, and so I totally get why he's such a big deal. But yeah, he just intrigues me more than anything. I love The Witch and The Lighthouse. The Lighthouse, to me, is a perfect film, and one of my favorites from the last decade or so. I'm not as high on The Northman, but it's an interesting experiment. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna fall pretty much closely in line with your thoughts on him. He is kind of like a folk horror hero plus film bro hero, I guess.
Yeah.
So, it is interesting for you to mention that, like, his trajectory being so quick. Like, I hadn't really thought about that, because you're right. Like, he's done these movies within like less than a decade, and it's really impressive to maintain that consistency, maintain that level of detail, and not have to do like one for them yet.
Right.
So it's really interesting to chart his kind of trajectory as like an auteur filmmaker. As far as his movies, I honestly, I want to say I've only seen the three of them once.
Okay.
Yeah, like The Witch I saw once, The Lighthouse, and The Northman. Yeah. I thought that they were all really good. The Northman also, I think I was a little higher on it than you were, but I think it takes such an interesting turn at the end that it kind of jostled me a little bit.
Right.
But they're just so unique and interesting, the movies that he makes. And Nosferatu is no different, despite being an established property that it itself was just completely like lifted from Dracula, one of the most iconic like pieces of literature and film in history. So having said that, did you have any reservations about Nosferatu, and what did you think, and kind of overall thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, when it was first announced, I was definitely excited about it, because I think the concept of Eggers doing his version of a classic monster story is really compelling. And, it was also an interesting prospect, him adapting something rather than doing an original story. I mean, The Northman is technically an adaptation, but it's such an old story, then he's taking such liberty with it that it's like almost its own thing.
Yeah.
But adapting such an iconic story as Nosferatu, or effectively Dracula, was intriguing. I will say The Northman probably gave me some reservations, if only because for me it felt like a significant step down in quality as he stepped out of his comfort zone. So I was like, okay, if he's going to do something that's an adaptation of a very popular, very well-known story, it's probably going to be huge in scale and highly stylistic. It could be another fumble. And so that, The Northman kind of had me going into it like,
Sure.
But I was still excited for it. And I was still, I wanted to see what he would do with something so well known.
Nice. I'm kind of the same way. It's funny because I've only seen the original Dracula. I didn't see the original Nosferatu, or is it Werner Herzog did the 70s?
In the 70s.
Yeah. I haven't seen either of those, but I was very, very much interested in seeing what a Robert Eggers Nosferatu movie would look like. And to his credit, I thought it was great. I think you probably were. I think it'll be an interesting conversation, because I've watched it twice now, and I actually bumped it up my letter grade a little bit, or my star rating slightly to now 4.5. I really liked it. The atmosphere, the just energy of it is so hypnotic, the way that a vampire story should be, and just that atmosphere and this like slow moving level of like almost glacier pacing, where it's just like you're anticipating like, oh, Count Orlok he's going to arrive and wreak havoc, but it's going to take a while before he gets there. It's going to take a lot of stuff. And then like everyone else around the movie is just like slowly coming to the realization that like this stuff is imminent, and like things are happening that is going to be horrifying. And I don't know, just like that that kind of slow pace matched with the energy of like Bill Skarsgård's performance and the level of doom that comes when you know the plot ramps up just felt really, really satisfying to me in terms of just like putting us through the paces of this horror story. So yeah, what did you think of it?
Well, I think I'm on the lower end of the general consensus, but I did like it. I enjoyed the movie. I liked it more than The Northman. And I agree with a lot of the things you said about it. I think its atmosphere is impeccable. I love the way that it emphasizes the like psychological hold that Nosferatu has, or that Count Orlok has on the main Lily Rose Depp's character. That is obviously an element in the original film, but it feels much more heightened in Eggers' adaptation. Like, we spend a lot of time basically in her head, hearing Orlok's voice kind of, sending his messages to her, planting his seeds. And I thought that was effective because that's something that's not really communicated all that clearly in the original. And I liked the heightened sexual angle of it. That, his feeding on people is partly this kind of spiritual, sexual ritual for him. And that the people he entices or, lures are also affected by it in that way. That, Lily Rose Depp's character almost has this kind of, like sexual draw to him in a way. And I thought that was cool. I liked horny Nosferatu. That was that was fun. I think where I didn't connect with it in the way that a lot of other people are is that I never, the movie looked gorgeous, great sound design and everything, incredible, unrecognizable performance from Bill Skarsgård, and Lily Rose Depp was also great. But I think I just never really felt any sense of actual terror or dread in the way that I did with like his first two films. I wasn't super invested in any of the characters. It kind of felt to me like a movie that was sort of going through all the beats of the original story because it knew it was supposed to, and didn't, for me, feel like it was emotionally justifying all of those in the characters' minds. It was just kind of like, okay, this character has to go here now, and okay, Nosferatu needs to, or Orlok needs to get on a boat now, and I was just like, okay, Eggers, you're checking off all the objective boxes here, but I just wasn't super invested. So I enjoyed it. It was a fun like exercise in mood and atmosphere, but I wasn't blown away.
That's so interesting because I think that's where I was at for the most part in my first viewing of it, because I also watched it like during awards crunch time, and it was like a day before the screener expired, so I was like half asleep when I was watching it like at midnight. So that gave this kind of like dreamlike quality to that first viewing. Sure. Which is it already has like this ephemeral, like dreamlike quality to it already, but I also did not connect with the characters that first time around. But last night watching it, I was more taken with it and more into the plot and characters, but I also don't have the baggage of the other two versions of the story in my mind. Plus, like, as I'm watching it, like, I know the Dracula story very well. Like, I've seen the movie several times, the original Dracula, and like, it follows it so closely that I did have that, but I saw it more as influence and more as like seeing like, oh, how this like vampire story has evolved from back then to now. And on the note of like the sexual nature of the movie and the sexual like undertones throughout it, I found that to be so captivating and interesting, specifically because there's such a link between vampire stories and sexual desire and to put too fine a point on it, the horniness of vampires. And obviously that runs the gamut of like fucking Twilight and True Blood and everything. But this is such an interesting, like, not necessarily exploration, but the running theme throughout it is just this energy of desire and like how that manifests among these characters, and how like giving into these desires, even if it's Orlok giving into it or her giving into it, is horrific in its own right. And
the sexual angle here is more animal, more repulsive, and kind of, it is kind of scary in its own right, rather than like most popular vampire adaptations where it's kind of portrayed as more sexy and seductive and like, I've fallen in love with a vampire, kind of, Twilight and True Blood and all that sort of thing. Whereas in this, it's like an addiction. It's like, it's corrosive. It rots your soul, literally kills you, know, and that I think that it's like sexual in a more clinical way.
Yes. And it also kind of on a similar note, it also kind of explores it kind of lightly touches on some of the other like aspects of vampire lore, like inviting them in, or the kind of glamour aspect of it, trying to like manipulate people. But it's not like this superpower of it or anything. It's just like, it's just like people are transfixed by him because despite him being a monstrosity of a humanoid creature, basically. So I liked that kind of almost subtle hand to those aspects of it, even though the sexual desire stuff is pretty prominent.
Well, it's something I hadn't really thought about, but I do retrospectively really like about the film is it kind of remystifies the powers of a vampire. Yeah. Whereas, we've gotten so many vampire stories over the hundreds of years that the stories have existed, that, we've kind of, as audience members, boiled down the like, okay, here's the set of powers a vampire has. Here's what Dracula can do. He can, open locked doors and doesn't show up in mirrors and things like that. And in this movie, Orlok does follow a lot of those same rules, but it's in a more subtle and kind of incidental way or conditional. It kind of puts it back in this space of like, okay, I'm not entirely sure I know how this works or what he's going to do next, but the imagery that's evoked still calls to mind those abilities. And like you said, rather than, you have to welcome him in order for him to enter a room, it's more like that's just the way he goes about attracting or deceiving or alluring people. Is like, he gets them to want him. Right. Yes. It's a little bit more nebulous as to like, does he do that because that's just how he wants to do it? Does he do that because he needs to do it? We don't really know. Yeah, exactly. And like the way that I really like the way that you put it, that he gets people to do things because he wants them to do them. Or however you phrased it, just like moments ago. He gets them to want him to do it. Yeah. Yes. Which, again, patreon.com/obsessive viewer, guys. But no, it's such an incredible performance by Bill Skarsgård. Like, it's so unrecognizable. Yeah. And it's like, it's so, the vocal range of it, the like audio effect of the voice, like it's like I put in my original like letterbox blurb that he's more like this just monstrosity of an organism rather than resembling anything
anything resembling human form, and like he's such an imposing figure as well, and it's just it's magnificent, and it's so fascinating to me, not fascinating, but celebratory to me. I don't know, I'm celebrating Bill Skarsgård because not only has he done this, but like he's Pennywise too. Like he's really made a name for himself as horror icon.
Yeah, his ability to transform has become something of a calling card for him. And even knowing that, even going into this movie thinking, okay, this is Bill Skarsgård, the guy who, he's, loves to change himself and transform and stuff. And going in and kind of looking for him in the performance, I was still like, where is he? Like, how is he there? Like that, it doesn't look like him. It doesn't sound like him. And it's funny to listen to like kind of the on-set stories that like when he wasn't shooting, he would be hanging around in his full costume and makeup, but like couldn't maintain the voice all the time. He did that only when the camera was rolling. So it's like I just imagine him sitting, by the crafty table, just chumming it up with somebody in full unrecognizable regalia, and just
that's
Bill
great.
Skarsgård's regular voice.
It's like the image of Bill Hader laughing with him in full Pennywise makeup on set of It Chapter 2. I love that, and it's so the movie also like noticeably conceals him throughout most of it until like it holds back like his full like visage or whatever, and it's to great effect. Like it's just like I will say that I didn't feel that sense of doom and terror that you had mentioned you didn't feel as well. Like with The Witch, I remember leaving the theater in like late at night and driving home and like passing by a little cemetery that I passed by every time I went to that theater, and like just felt this sense of unease. Like and like as a grown adult, I'm just like, I'm scared of this cemetery because of The Witch. But like I didn't get really that kind of sense of dread from the movie in terms of like an emotional or a strong like fear-based resonance from it. But I think that's kind of replaced by like this just me being in awe of it as a technical achievement, because there's so many elements to it that just felt just so strong. And maybe that's an indictment on the movie, because like,
well, but I mean, there's something to be said too for just being appreciating a film's like portrayal of like, not specifically an existing character or story, but like, this is a pretty interesting, compelling depiction of, what a vampire is, what a vampire does. And, even if, like I said, I wasn't super taken by the human characters or the beats of the story, it's still like, okay, this is a really cool, like little vampire story. And, so I think that's valid, and even, not necessarily, for me, it's a flaw with the film, but I see why it wouldn't be for everyone.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah. To kind of go back to the influence on it and everything, what I kind of found this time around when I watched it was, there are like, aside from like Dracula and the other Nosferatu movies, like my kind of, or aside from that, like, or whatever, because I haven't seen the other Nosferatu movies, but my kind of point of reference for vampire stories is like, of course, Salem's Lot by Stephen King, and more recently, Midnight Mass by Mike Flanagan. Yeah. Which I don't like as technically impressive and atmospheric and incredibly well made as this is. I don't think it reaches that level of just awesome stuff. Well, I mean, Salem's Lot, the book, is probably it's probably beats that, but I don't think it beats Midnight Mass for me in terms of.
Yeah, I love Midnight Mass.
No, it's so freaking good.
Well, like, and that's that's an example of I think taking an existing concept of the vampire and injecting it with a kind of a unique association to something that we all understand, or many of us understand, the religious aspect of it, and the kind of religious self-flagellation and things like that. I liked how it imbued the Catholicism and the stuff into not necessarily vampire lore, but this particular vampire in that story. And that was something I think I wanted more of from this movie. I loved the heightened, like I said, animalistic sexual nature of it, but I think I wanted it to, like, not just, I mean, it went for it pretty hard in terms of like visceral depiction of it, but I think I wanted more, I don't know, conceptual exploration of that, or like what it means for these human characters to be under that spell, or to feel drawn to that.
Like make it more pertinent to, like, not necessarily having like a messaging system in it or anything, but like make it more pertinent to like the overall story, like, because there's a lot of there, like there's a lot in there. It's not like gratuitous like in a sexual way or anything, but there's a lot to that it's a running theme throughout the movie that I agree doesn't really connect in a way that is above being just this visceral like demonstration of tone and atmosphere. It
feels like a very, I mean, obviously a very conscious choice that ultimately doesn't have a thesis behind it, I guess. And maybe it seems that a lot of people did not need it to have a thesis, and so that's fine. But my sticking point is that at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't really know why we did that. I liked it,
right?
But I don't. I wasn't convinced of its importance, I guess.
You just described I'm sure you just described your position on all four of your guest appearances on Obsessive Viewer last year. Not sure why we did that, but fine.
But I enjoyed it.
But no, I agree that lack of thesis statement to it, at least an apparent one, is an issue that I have with it, but it's just packaged together in such a beautiful packaging that I kind of forgive it for that. And it's interesting too, kind of going back to the Salem's Lot aspect of it. Like, even though the novel isn't one of my favorite Stephen King novels, but it is interesting because it's indicative of what a modern Nosferatu or modern Dracula movie could have been, in that, like, I'm glad, not that there was any chance of this, but I'm glad that it's like this movie is independent of the Dracula inspiration. Like, it follows the plot really closely, but he's doing unique things. He's visualizing it in unique ways. Whereas, like, you have like Salem's Lot, which is a story about like a writer in the 70s. It's following the Dracula formula and calling attention to it throughout it. That it's interesting to kind of see something live and breathe as unique to itself while being using the blueprint from things that came before it. So I think it's a unique enough vision from Eggers to kind of have it be its own thing.
Sure. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Would you like to go into spoilers for Nosferatu?
Yeah. Well, before we do, I do want to make kind of one point, because you were talking about the design of Orlok earlier, and how I liked how you mentioned it's all like almost kind of barely human, like it's almost like this creature forced to behave somewhat like a human. And I'll say this now just as kind of a, I'll give the non-spoiler version, then when we go into spoilers, I can explain a little bit better what I mean. But I found myself kind of two minds about Orlok's design once we kind of fully see it. I do like that the movie takes its time in revealing him to you. And I agree with what you said that for the most part, his design is, it's almost like he's pretending to be a human when he's really this, grotesque monster. There is one aspect of the design that's unique to this version of Nosferatu, which I won't reveal till spoilers.
Okay.
But like completely took me, like it really flew in the face of that. It's like I wanted to see him as this monster masquerading as a human, but this one design choice kind of zapped that for me, and I was like, I wish we had just not done that, and then maybe I could really be into the monstrous nature of him.
Interesting.
So, we'll
Interesting. Yes, I like that little dangling carrot there.
Yeah,
awesome. Well, what did you end up rating this on Letterboxd, and then we can go into spoilers.
I gave it a 3.5.
Nice.
I did not give it the little Letterboxd heart, which usually I give as my sort of more emotional indication of whether or not I enjoyed myself, which is not really fair because I did enjoy this, so maybe I would add the heart back, but it was kind of one of those, I admired it more than I enjoyed it, I guess. So
nice.
3.5.
Nice. That's totally fair. And again, listeners, you can follow Andy at Dandible on Letterboxd, and I rated it 4.5 stars with a heart. I really liked it. So, even if it's a little bit lacking in some aspects, I'm a sucker for just that atmosphere and everything. So having said that, we're going to go ahead and go into spoilers for Nosferatu, which again is in theaters. So I'm going to play a clip from the trailer. When we come back, we're going to go into spoilers for Nosferatu. If you want to avoid that, check the show notes for timestamps. Here we go. This clip from the trailer, and then we're spoiling Nosferatu.
It is like a dream. It was our wedding. When we turned around, everyone was dead. The stench of their bodies was horrible. Standing before me was death. But I'd never been so happy.
All right, so spoilers on for Nosferatu. It's also interesting that they had that section of movie was directly lifted from listeners' experience listening to the Obsessive Viewer podcast. So Andy, we're in spoilers for Nosferatu, and another I'm sure I know what you were referring to in terms of the design. But I want to make an educated guess that's mostly for joke purposes, but is it because we saw his dick?
No, I actually loved seeing Orlok cock.
Nice.
I just couldn't. I wanted to. I couldn't get behind the stash.
That was my
Your serious
my
guess.
serious guess. Yeah, because like as you were saying that, I was like it is weirdly distracting because like yes, he is this monstrosity, this monster person, and then I'm just like imagining like does he have like one of his like minions or something just like trimming his stash? Like how does he do grooming? Yeah,
I went to see the movie on Christmas Day with my wife and my co-host Logan, and I joked to them afterward that I was longing. I was just waiting for a Orlok shaving sequence where like we just saw him remove the mustache and then he became his true form.
Nice.
I don't know that would have helped, like but I was taken aback by it at first, but in kind of a good way. It was like, oh, here's Nosferatu as we've never seen him before. He looks very different. He looks like a, just some old Russian dude,
right?
Which was kind of compelling at first. What I was hoping was that like maybe that was in the vein of what we were saying earlier about like a monster masquerading as a man. I was hoping that maybe that was some form he kind of temporarily took on to appear more normal, like as Nicholas Hoult characters came to visit and, you know, sell him the property in England. But I was kind of hoping that, like, yeah, okay, maybe he starts out with the mustache just to seem like a regular dude, but like maybe when Holt finds him in his coffin or whatever, he no longer has the stash. We can drop it. We can move on.
Right.
He can look a little bit more. I just think it was almost there in terms of creating a character who looks very unnatural, very inhuman. But then a mustache is something that only people have, you know, that your neighbor has, that your coworker has. And so it was just something that, like, it felt like the movie was trying to lean toward more monster than man, but then he had a mustache, which tilts it very much towards man. And so I was like, man, I just shave it off, and then we can have real alien, evil, weird, inhuman looking, like, cave creature Nosferatu. So I don't know, it's a very silly thing. It's like a nitpick that became a real irritation for me in the movie, just because it felt almost kind of conceptually at odds with what the movie how the movie was trying to portray him. But I also get it, and I appreciate the attempt to portray an iconic character in a way that we hadn't seen before. So in the service of that, I get it.
That's fair. And I will say this, I mean, if you like, I think your wish will be fulfilled in July when you see this dork with, like, this weird like hair and glasses transform into Superman in July.
Right.
So we'll get that. But yeah, that's so interesting, because it wasn't until you were talking about it that I just realized, like, yeah, he does have a mustache. That's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. And I think I agree. It would have been really cool if it was just like this thing that he did to disguise himself, or to make himself more human. But yeah, it didn't really bother me. But I'll see if it distracts me on Saturday when I see it for the third freaking time. Yeah.
But no, I did deeply respect and appreciate the full frontal Orlok shot. So
yes. Yeah, that was it surprised me last night when I saw it again, because I was just like, oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah. My only gripe with Nosferatu Peen is that it didn't have little, like, bat wings on it. I think it needed
Yeah. Well, okay.
But
I can
like
understand
flapping,
that. Yeah. But you also don't want him to be too human, like, because that's a normal thing. That
would look way too much like mine.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, good.
Right.
Wait, okay. I'm going to get you involved in a group chat that I've been in for years. Okay.
Oh, okay.
You're one of us. So, this, I don't know where this is going. But,
segue out of that one.
Yeah. But I will say this, to get as far away from that runner of joking around that we did. But, something I found also really interesting, that, again, I don't have the context of the other movies, but something I found interesting is the way that he devours people. Like, there are moments where he is like going for their heart, like in the chest, is really interesting. I hadn't, like, in terms of the mechanics of it, obviously, like, vampires in pop culture are like, oh, like, the little slits in the neck, and that's how they get the blood and everything. But, like, to see Count Orlok do that and go through, like, the chest cavity, and presumably to get to the heart, to pump the blood out of the heart, is just to your point about the sexual desire things. It's like this animalistic, instinctual sort of just like feasting thing that I found really interesting.
Right. Like, we're not doing the necking at makeout, reef. Like, it's not sensual. It's sexual in this very animalistic way, and like all the sucking sounds you hear. You know, part of me kind of wished we, like, maybe saw a more detailed shot of what his sucking process actually looked like.
Same.
Like, do teeth, like, protrude out of his mouth? You know, does he have a tube or something?
Yeah.
I don't know. but at the same time, I also did appreciate that we would get like lengthy shots of just like the victim's face with just
yes
going on in the background.
Yeah.
And him like undulating on top of
yes.
them like he's humping them.
Right.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah. And then that kind of the money shot of the movie with like his naked body and her just like taking him in basically to not put too fine a point on it is just like it's grotesque, it's horrifying in its own right. And what I liked about that, and we can circle back to some of the other spoiler stuff we can talk about, but I love that final sequence because it just has this level of like the destruction of Count Orlok is because of his desire and because of him being so drawn to her, while she has also been very drawn to him, and her succumbing to those urges so that she can destroy him is just like I found it really, really good, like really compelling and good.
That the puppet master kind of becomes the puppet, and his ability to create an addiction in other people becomes his addiction and ultimately his undoing, because his victim becomes I don't know, privy to that or whatever, or realizes what's happening. That was well done. And just that specific sequence, the kind of like one shot depiction of his demise was cool. And then we pan down and we see his crusty body, dilapidated on top of her.
Really good stuff. But yeah, what else do you want to talk about in spoilers? Well,
so one thing I did not expect from this movie was I had heard Lily Rose Depp was like, a big kind of surprise in this movie because her previous projects were apparently not very impressive. I didn't see them, but I was not expecting her to like go full Possession, like I don't know if you've seen that movie Possession with Sam Neill and gosh, her name always escapes me, but the lead actress in that gives a iconic performance of just absolute lunacy, like completely overtaken with this sort of possessive force. And that kind of happens to Lily Rose Depp's character in this, and her performance, especially in those later scenes where she's just absolutely losing her shit,
right,
were awesome. Like appropriately like gross and awkward in a way that like I don't know if you've ever witnessed a person like having a seizure in real life is like. It's not it is very awkward, and it's like they make a lot of faces and gestures that are like, okay, we think of these intense traumatic moments in life kind of like how they're portrayed in movies as these like intense, dramatic, scary, like sad things. And then in reality, they are kind of awkward. And it's like, I would hate to see a picture of myself doing that, like,
sure.
And her performance in those intense sequences in this reminded me of that feeling. Like it just felt authentic in a way that was like, this, if I were Lily Rose Depp, I would hate to watch these scenes back because I would cringe, but not because it was poorly done, just because it's like, I don't like seeing myself like that. It
is really interesting to see that, because I also didn't expect that aspect of the movie. And I also agree. She did a phenomenal job in the movie. And what's interesting is I've only seen 2 other movies that she's been in, and I will say that this is much better than Voyagers, which was a sci-fi Lord of the Flies space movie. That was the first movie I saw in theaters after COVID restrictions like lifted and everything. So. And that's literally all I remember of it. But that kind of level of commitment to the bit, basically, of being like drawn to him, it's this weird, like almost dysfunctional relationship with him to an extent.
Yeah.
Like when she and Nicholas Hoult like have sex as a weird like oh, it's in your face, Orlok, like show him what your love means or whatever. I was like,
yeah,
oh, okay.
It was kind of like, I don't know, cuck adjacent.
Sure. Yeah.
Similar vibes to that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Their sex scene, Nick Hoult and Depp, was weird in a good way. And off-putting, almost more so than the actual Orlok scenes.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It had its own level of just unsettlingness or unease to them. And what did you think of Nicholas Hoult overall in this movie? I thought he did a fine job. I think maybe his best performance of 2024, because he was also in The Order and Juror number 2, and I feel like there's another one I can't think of.
You might be right. Yeah, I don't think I saw any of his other movies this year, but so I can't rank it relatively speaking. But yeah, I thought he was really good. I thought he I think I would say he went above and beyond in portraying the like terror of experiencing Count Orlok.
Yeah.
Like when he's isolated in the castle. He really, from head to toe, he's sweating, he's panting, he's, it's a well done, full bodied performance that I appreciated. And Nick Holt's great. I mean, he's one of those that, like, I don't know that he necessarily gets the recognition he deserves, because maybe a lot of his roles aren't super demanding, I guess. But
sure,
I think he proves in this movie that he's got some serious chops. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it's his best performance, but it was certainly a more extreme performance than I have seen from him, I think, and I appreciated seeing that side of him. A more frenetic performance.
I agree. Like, I talked about his performance in The Order a few weeks ago on the podcast, and like he was fine in it. Like he was okay in it. The movie kind of had some issues that I couldn't really reconcile. But I think he had a tough job in this movie because his character is kind of our window into Orlok from the beginning. Like that whole extended like prologue sequence, essentially, where it's him traveling to Transylvania and him going like meeting Orlok and being attacked. Like that entire like 20 minutes of movie is like, that's where all of the start of that impending doom, the atmosphere, the tone of the movie is set up and built up throughout the movie. And I think that he carried that incredibly well and really made it really made it sing for me. Yeah. Anything else we can talk about in spoilers?
Well, we were talking about Holt being, rather impressive. One performance that I think I'm not alone in thinking sort of stuck out in a negative way was Aaron Taylor Johnson. I don't necessarily, as tempting as it is on the heels of Kraven the Hunter, I don't necessarily think it's like he's a bad actor type situation. I think it was probably he played the character as he was directed to, and his character is kind of, depicted as a buffoon. But it's, I don't know. He stuck out in this movie because he felt like the only character where it was almost like every line was not that he was trying to be funny, but that we were meant to sort of be laughing at him. At least that's how it felt. And it didn't really, I was like, none of the rest of this movie feels that way. He's just, why am I rooting against this character or feeling joy at his misfortune? And, a lot of his characters or lines are just really hammy, and he plays them up really kind of like boisterous and puffed up and snooty, and it just didn't really work for me. It was a little bit cartoony.
A little
So-
bit. I can totally get behind that. And it really kind of suffers when his character obviously like suffers tragic loss in the movie. And I feel like he doesn't really get to reach that point of the drama of it because of his approach to the role. Like, I agree with you. And
well, and on top of that, just the way the story plays out is like he loses his wife and children in a pretty, I mean, the way that the children's death is portrayed is pretty shocking.
Yeah.
And then like the next time we see him, basically he's hopping on top of his wife's corpse,
right,
and dies fucking her, and it's
yeah.
like, all right, that's good.
Yeah. And I know this is such a tired observation. This is such a tired criticism of people in period movies, but I'm aware of that. But like, he's one of those actors that's like, okay, if he's playing someone set like in 1838, it's like, it's also weird because it's like he knows what an iPhone is. Like,
Yeah,
he has
looks
that
too
look about him.
modern,
Yeah.
memorized. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. How'd you feel about Willem Dafoe? We have not talked about him in this movie.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as a pretty staunch Dafoe head, and whose favorite Eggers film is The Lighthouse, in which I would argue Dafoe almost plays two characters. I mean, just as like a fan, I was a little disappointed he didn't have more to do. He was in the movie, I think, more than I thought he would be, but he's not super exciting to watch. He's good. He does plays the part well, but it's not a super, I don't know. Like, I guess I wanted him to be a little bit more eccentric, and then his kind of turn at the end where he sort of loses it and goes crazy felt kind of abrupt to me.
Yeah.
And also not, he clearly doesn't really, because then the following scene at the very end of the movie,
he's there
kind of back to normal.
Yeah.
He just has this weird moment where he's like, haha, we have to kill her.
Right.
Like, and it's like, okay, I can't tell if this guy's nuts or not.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of losing interest in finding out.
Yeah, and the way that that's set up, it seems like I was just like, is he setting himself on fire too? Like, it seems a little weird.
Yeah, I thought
it's
he was
like,
just going to burn down with the house.
the crypt or whatever. Yeah, I was, because when he pops up at the end, it's like, oh, okay, well, all right,
he followed her back.
He's fine.
Yeah.
Like, cool.
Yeah.
Didn't have any smoke inhalation or anything. Like,
yeah,
all right, cool.
But he was good. I mean, Dafoe is like never not good.
Yeah,
like, he still
I agree.
Plays the part well.
Yeah. So yeah, I do agree. I wish that he was a little bit more prominent in it. What we get of him is good for me. I like his performance in this, but I do wish his character was a little more fleshed out, especially since, I mean, his character is like the Van Helsing analog, and that's a huge character. So
yeah.
So yeah. Any other thoughts on Nosferatu?
How did you feel about the overall look of the film?
I thought it was very visually striking and stunning. Any like the way that it is shot, like at night, where it looks almost like full on black and white photography. Yeah. I thought that was really interesting. And it kind of, it helped with that kind of ghostly image of him. Like I really like the design of like seeing his shadow but not seeing him, cast by the curtains and everything. Like that kind of created this like dreamlike quality to it. But yeah, the overall look of the film, mustache notwithstanding, was really really good. I liked it.
Yeah. I thought Eggers came up with a lot of great kind of I don't even know what the word would be, but like visual choices, like stylistic flourishes to express something, like you said, the shadows to show his presence, and like the moment where Holt's character is like walking through the woods and he reaches this like ethereal, junction between reality and surreality, and the more formalistic stylized choices I liked a lot. I also thought the movie was really striking in that it was almost like, I don't know if this is how they did it, but the way the movie looks, I would describe as almost like the entire thing was day for night. Like they shot it during the day and graded it or lit it or something to look like nighttime. Because I would say almost none of this movie looks natural, and that's not a knock. That's like a specific choice that he's making. It all looks very kind of fantasy nightmare thing. But I thought that was interesting because I was like, it was almost like we were never meant to know whether it was daytime or nighttime.
Oh,
in the movie. And I don't know if that was Eggers trying to kind of evoke the original film, because the original film, I'm pretty sure, is shot entirely during the day.
Okay.
And uses colorized, like it just washes the entire screen in a specific color to indicate the time of day.
Interesting.
Like when it's blue, it's nighttime. When it's red, it's like dawn or something. And when it's yellow, it's daytime. But otherwise, without those color cues, it's all daylight.
Sure. Interesting.
And so I wonder if that was Eggers trying to do his spin on that. Is like, I'm going to keep this is a world of night, basically, is like what Eggers is communicating. It's a dark world, and even the stuff that kind of looks like it's taking place during the day is very like kind of shadowy and melancholy looking. And I thought that was cool.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I would be curious to find out how that was achieved, because I think that it does strike this very interesting visual tone. So yeah, interesting. Any other things? I thought there was something else I was going to bring up, but I can't remember. I think it was going to be a stupid joke, but I can't remember what it was. No,
I think I'm pretty satisfied.
All right, nice. Well, thank you for joining me for this review. We are going to go into the secondary review. I'm going to, but then we're going to come back with Andy at the end of this episode for a potpourri section. But just to kind of give the listeners another piece of information, like, do you want to tell the people where they can find you online, where they can find your work, and everything, so that while I'm rambling about Babygirl, they can go like subscribe to your show and everything by the time you get back for potpourri.
Yeah. Odd Trilogies can be found at oddtrilogies.com, and also you can listen on pretty much any of the major podcast and music streaming platforms. We're also on Instagram at Odd Trilogies. We're on Twitter technically, although I'm pretty inactive at odd_trilogies. I'm thinking about starting a Blue Sky for Odd Trilogies, because that seems to be the premier replacement for Twitter these days. And yeah, check us out. We do pretty much 2 episodes a month, 2 trilogies a month, and got some interesting ideas in the mix for our 2025 schedule. So
nice. Anything you want to unveil here on Obsessive Viewer?
Sure. Yeah, we teased we will be teasing on our top 10 episode that our first episode of 2025 is actually going to be it'll feature Aaron Taylor Johnson as well, because we are doing Sony's Spider-Man-less Spider-Man universe, kind of their Marvel scraps. We did, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, we did the Venom trilogy with Evan Dossie, but we're going to go back for more slop and do the other 3 Sony Marvel films now that that franchise has supposedly been laid to rest.
Right.
So yeah, we're talking about Morbius, Madam Web, and Kraven the Hunter.
Nice. Well, I'm very excited for that, but I'm also not excited that it's going to force me to watch Kraven the Hunter in preparation for listening. So I'm looking forward to it. Please ignore any angry messages I send you. No, I feel like I'd probably have fun at Kraven the Hunter. We'll see.
I mean, it's terrible, but there's fun to it as well.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Well, that is our review of Nosferatu. Once again, it is in theaters, and once again, I'm going to go into the secondary review, and then we're going to wrap up with some potpourri. So stay tuned for the secondary review. Okay, and before we get to our secondary review, I want to take a quick moment to remind you that if you like the show, please take a moment to follow us on social media and subscribe to and rate the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or whatever your preferred podcast app is. And don't forget to subscribe to the Obsessive Viewer Podcast YouTube channel as well, where I'm posting more and more videos and live streams of podcasts. And if you're interested in starting a podcast of your own, you can go to Libsyn and use promo code OBSESS. When you sign up for a new account, you'll get up to 2 months free, depending on when you sign up, and we'll get a commission on it as well. So more details on that are in the show notes of this episode. And now back to the show.
They tell me I view obsessively.
All right. And for tonight's secondary review, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts in a non-spoiler review of Babygirl, which is in theaters. It was in theater. It premiered in theaters December 25th, like Nosferatu. And the premise, according to IMDb, is a high-powered CEO puts her career and family on the line when she begins a torrid affair with her much younger intern. Director for this movie was Halina Reijn. She previously directed Bodies, Bodies, Bodies in 2022 and Instinct in 2019. She also wrote this movie, and the cast includes Nicole Kidman, Harris Dickinson, Antonio Banderas, Sophia Wilde, and Esther McGregor. And I forgot to play a clip from the trailer, so I'm going to go ahead and play a clip from the trailer. When I come back, I will share my non-spoiler thoughts on Babygirl.
If we're gonna do this, we need to set some rules that you and I both agree on.
Did you order this?
Starting with, I tell you what to do and you do it.
And if I don't?
Get on your knees.
No. What?
Get on your knees now.
I'm...
Is that what you want?
You're very young. I don't want to hurt you.
Hurt me? I think I have power over you. Because I could make one call and you lose everything. Does that turn you on when I say it? Oh, hey, you forgot your laptop at the office.
Mom, can Mary sleep over?
I genuinely believe women with power would behave differently.
Want to stop?
All right, so Babygirl, like I said, is in theaters now. I thought that this was okay. This was very solid. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. I rated it 3.5 stars, but I feel like there was more that could be done with it. It's a kind of it's not a thriller. It's like an erotic sort of drama. And it's being celebrated for exploring like BDSM and topics of consent and kind of showcasing like proper consent for this type of relationship. And I do applaud it for that. There are some interesting scenes where like they're literally talking to each other about like consent, how they're going to handle this interesting affair that they find themselves in. But I feel like it's also not really that it's not worth celebrating that much. Like that's one small aspect of the movie. And I think that what I found most captivating about it is that the tug of war of the power dynamics, basically. So Nicole Kidman is the high powered CEO, and Harris Dickinson is the intern she has that she engages in an affair with. And what I found so interesting about it is the build up toward that affair. The build up of it is this not game of cat and mouse, but this game of like mutual attraction and boundary testing in terms of conversation. And like he's pushing to like he's kind of pushing to get into like an affair with her, basically, by doing things like having her be his mentor for a mentor program as an intern, and then also like him testing the waters of like the boundaries of the CEO and intern relationship by like offering her cookies and like ordering her a glass of milk, which apparently really happened to the director at some point. And it's whatever, but like, I feel like there's something missing to it that could have been a more interesting exploration of these two characters, really. So as much as I do appreciate and understand the appreciation for the conversations of consent and the power dynamics that are at play in this movie, and the performances, because both Harris Dickinson and Nicole Kidman give very good performances as they're navigating this like unsure territory for both of them, basically. So that's where my appreciation for the movie comes in, is that Samuel, played by Harris Dickinson, doesn't come across as someone who is trying to, like, he's pushing boundaries, but he's not pushing boundaries in a sense of like trying to get one up on the CEO. He's not doing it for nefarious means. He's just attracted to her, and it seems at times that he's testing the waters of his own interest in this type of like dominating like BDSM sort of relationship. Because like there's a moment in the trailer even that where he's like they're in a room and he's like, get on your knees, and then he laughs because of the absurdity of the request and the absurdity of it. And it's like this fake sort of like authoritarian or authoritative stance that he takes when he's recognizing like the dynamics of like the power dynamics at play. And that's where the movie is most interesting for me, because also it explores like Nicole Kidman's character throughout the movie. It like says a few times like, oh, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to like lead you on, or I don't want you to think that this is something else or what have you. And it's really interesting because Samuel as a character seems completely unbothered by that. Like there's no like sense of like, oh, he's going to fall in love with her, or they're going to have like this torrid love affair that turns into love. And the main crux of the movie is that she's going to have to choose between her family and this young kid, that she's with. And it's not that. It's just like her exploring herself through this affair with this young man and coming out at the end as someone who knows more about herself than she knew going into it. And I feel like the movie kind of has some like loses its footing a little bit toward the end in terms of reconciling like the growth of the characters, her character and Samuel's character, and the way that they intermingle and the way that they kind of react to certain aspects of their relationship and their relationships with others, and others' relationship to them. I feel like it could have been a little bit more tightly demonstrated how dramatic and potentially damaging this affair was for both parties. It does do that, and to the movie's credit, it does explore that in a way that feels more real and more kind of just genuinely authentic to the characters and their positions. It doesn't go for high drama or go for like melodrama for it. It kind of has a more thought-provoking approach to it, but I kind of just wish that there was a little bit more to it than what we got. So I would definitely watch this again. It's an interesting movie that wasn't quite what I expected, and not as salacious as you would expect. So it's a lot more measured and interesting in terms of characterization, but I just wish that there was a little bit more to that in the movie. So again, that's Babygirl, and that is my secondary review for the evening. So I don't have anything else really to say. So I'm gonna bring Andy back into the show, and we're gonna close out the episode with some potpourri. So stay tuned. All right, and that was my review of Babygirl, and Andy is back for potpourri. Andy, welcome back. It's been I don't know how long I will have talked about Babygirl.
3.5 hours.
Yes, exactly.
I've been sitting here.
Yes. Yeah, I forced him to sit quietly as I recorded that entire review.
Yeah.
So thank you for your patience, Andy, and yeah, so we're going to wrap up this episode with a potpourri section, which is, if this is your first time listening, potpourri is a section of the podcast where we kind of wind down and share some thoughts on things we've watched lately, what we've watched, what we're looking forward to, whatever we want as long as it smells good. Andy, do you want to get us kicked off with Potpourri? I have 2 things I can bring up. If you have 1 or 2, I'll let you give free reign if you want to start us off.
Okay. Yeah, I've got a couple. I would say 2 major highlights of things I've been watching recently were Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I went to see that with a friend of mine and my wife, and that was a lot of fun. I've had an interesting arc with the Sonic movies. I really hated the first film when it came out, like absolutely.
That's interesting.
Loathed it. And I think part of that, a lot of my beef with that movie comes from, or at least at the time came from, it felt like Jim Carrey was just, well, it didn't feel like, I knew for a fact Jim Carrey was just there to like be Jim Carrey and do the Jim Carrey thing.
Sure.
And I like Jim Carrey. I think he's fun, but it grated on me that he was just like, it felt like a gun for hire. And I found a lot of his stuff just didn't work for me. I rewatched the first film and finally watched the second film in prep for Sonic 3 and actually came away liking the first film a lot better.
Nice.
I don't love it. I think it's kind of a mediocre movie, but there were gems in there, and I came away kind of like, it was not a bad time.
Nice.
The second one, I liked it maybe a little bit less, but it was fine again. And then Sonic 3, it kind of feels like they've finally sort of tightened up the formula and figured out like, how do we do all the fan service and also do, a story that's fun and compelling for multiple age groups. We had a blast with it. It's not a perfect movie. It's still got a lot of the dumb writing of the first film, first and second film. But, I think they're figuring out what's fun about this version of Sonic that they've created. And Ben Schwartz is great as the voice of Sonic. And of course, Shadow is there, fan favorite Shadow. He unfortunately never curses and never shoots anybody with his gun, but beggars can't be choosers. So yeah, that was fun. That was a fun little pre-Christmas trip to the theater.
Nice. Yeah, that was actually like I said earlier in this episode, that was my final theater viewing of 2024. Which I got in right under the wire because the theater I go to was closed down for a few days. Like, weirdly enough,
it was an AMC, right?
Yeah,
like a big chain theater.
Yep, and like it was weird. It was closed for like a few days. People on Reddit were claiming that it was because of a gas leak or something. So I don't know, but I went and it was open and everything worked fine.
Well, that explains the brain damage since I last talked to you.
Yes, exactly. I keep seeing this like these shadows in the curtains of my room and stuff, and like
he is coming.
Yes, come to me. But yeah, Sonic 3, I agree. I liked it a lot. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoy the first Sonic, interestingly enough. Yeah. And it's something that like it's not like I'm not gonna like it's a fun like diversion of a movie. Like it's something to throw on in the background.
Yeah. I find these movies at this point to be kind of like kid-friendly Fast and Furious. In terms of like level of quality and the type of experience you get. It's like, these are dumb. Don't think about them too much.
Yeah. And every movie adds a new character to the family.
Yeah. And they the lore keeps growing, but they kind of start to polish up the storytelling a little bit. Yeah. That's a really good point. I agree completely. It's a lot of fun, and I had fun with Sonic 3. It's interesting you don't like Jim Carrey's performance in the first one at least, but like, are you because you're a bit younger than I, although I'm young at heart, I'm a toddler, but are you a fan of like early Jim Carrey? Like, I would say yes. I grew up on like Ace Ventura and stuff. Really enjoyed that. I think Jim Carrey is a hilarious person. However, I do find a lot of his movies kind of, playing on the same gags and things in a way that can get kind of old and repetitive. One of my favorite movies is The Truman Show. Which he's excellent, but of course he's not really doing like slap happy, crazy Jim Carrey as much in that. He's still funny, but I think I was just a little taken aback that like the first Sonic movie was almost kind of like it was almost kind of like the return of Jim Carrey, you know, in a sense, like him doing a really ridiculous slapstick role and stuff. And so I think I was a little disappointed that he wasn't trying something a little bit new, but rather just like falling back on old tricks, because I'm sure that's why he was hired. You know? We need people to see this Sonic movie, so get Jim Carrey to be Jim Carrey. But I will say the third film in particular, maybe the second film a little bit too, but especially the third film, kind of won me over on his Eggman, and I really liked where they went with him.
Nice. Me too. Yeah, I enjoyed him, and I enjoy these movies, and I'm excited. I'm excited that they greenlit a fourth one, even though that kind of puts a little bit of a kibosh on your plans on Odd Trilogies.
We were thinking about doing the Sonic trilogy, and now it kind of feels like the rug was pulled out from under.
Yeah. Yep. Here's the thing, like, it was announced so quickly after Sonic the Hedgehog 3 opened that. I mean,
it was the same day.
Yeah.
It was the day of release.
Yeah, it just sounds like you. In other words, in terms of recording podcasts, you got to go fast. Got to go fast. Yeah, I don't know. Can I give my potpourri?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So like I said, I have two. I'm just the second one's gonna be light, but my first one is a movie that I will mention this next week on next week's show, but I'm going to try to, when I have guests on, I'm going to try to watch a movie that they love or adore in some capacity. And I watched Grand Prix from 1966. Yeah, and I think last week on the show, you sang its praises, and I know that you've been a big Grand Prix head.
Yes, yeah, I have been espousing the gospel of Grand Prix, especially to you guys, like a couple of the IFJA members. I watched that movie for the first time a couple years ago. My friend, whose dad is a huge like Formula One fan, had always told him, like, my friend had always told him, like, you know, this is an incredible movie, you got to watch it. So Patrick, my friend, finally showed it to me, and I was just blown away with the racing scenes that they pulled off in 1966. It's
insane, man. Like I really enjoyed the movie. I haven't grown up since I grew up in Speedway, Indiana. I grew up a mile away from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and like, I'm not a big racing fan or anything, but like I can see like the artistry in creating that, and I don't understand how like big like racing set pieces in movies are constructed, because it's so it's just so like huge. The scale is massive, and what was so transfixing to me about Grand Prix is it's like every like I put it on Letterboxd that I've never seen auto racing depicted in as beautiful and thrilling a way as it is in Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And I also like, there are moments in this movie that like it made me realize that not only have I never seen it depicted so beautifully, so like grandiose, so like spectacularly well shot.
Yeah.
I've also like every single like racing sequence I've seen in a movie that's come after this feels like it was influenced by this. Like, it just feels like everything that I've been impressed by has been like, oh, we're doing what Grand Prix did.
Yeah. Well, and it's especially crazy because that movie doesn't really have that reputation. Like it's really? Not a movie. I mean, I had never heard of it until my friend told me about it. You know, it's not a movie that, I don't want to say that it's not appreciated, but it hasn't held up to time as like an iconic film or anything. You know, most people have never heard of it. And, you know, maybe part of that is that racing films have never, I don't think, been that huge.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of really good ones out
Right.
there. But yeah, it's kind of insane how influential that movie was, not just to films about racing, but movies that involve elaborate driving sequences, because that movie invented all sorts of techniques and technology to film driving in a way that had never been done before, because like it was always rear projection and stuff before that. And then that movie, John Frankenheimer was like, no, fuck it, we're strapping the camera to the side of the car and you're going to drive 200 miles an hour. I'm sorry.
It's just, and it's
wild.
Yeah, like it's a 3-hour movie, and it's got an overture, it's got an intermission, all of that stuff. But like, I mean, like the first like 20 minutes of the movie is Monaco. It's like it's one race, and like that, I was just so mesmerized by that, and
feels insanely modern in a way.
Absolutely,
just like the amount of the detail of the cinematography in that opening sequence.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I felt like some of the characterization, like the character stuff off the track, was a little bit like it didn't really click with me until like the end of the movie, honestly.
Sure.
Like it felt
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it felt a little bit not disjointed, but it felt a little bit like, okay, these characters are having their stuff and everything, but it wasn't until like the end of the movie where it was just like, oh, this is a story about 4 different drivers and how their like experience this season of racing like leads to where they end up. And it was just like, it makes me want to see it again, to really appreciate that stuff even more. Also, it just looks so freaking good, man.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I absolutely get that, because when I first watched it, I was, blown away by the racing sequences, but was like, the racing sequences make kind of the droning character drama worthwhile.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I rewatched it earlier this year, because Logan and I both wrote pieces on the film on our website. But when we rewatched it, I was really won over by, if not the like scene by scene dialogue stuff, which is fairly conventional and typical and not the most exciting in the world. I was, however, won over by the film's thematic approach to portraying these characters, these athletes, as kind of like not just broken, but like, there's something actually wrong with somebody who wants to get in a vehicle like that over and over again and do this for a living. Like, I'm not sure I've seen a sports movie that really goes to that extreme to be like, yeah, this ain't right.
Right.
And I liked that the film, it unifies all of its main characters around that idea. And I especially like how it bookends the film at the beginning and the end races. There's these, the voiceovers of the characters, and the voiceovers are written in a way that feels like, a pre or post race interview, like it's a press piece, a media piece. And I like that, because it's like, it's reminding you of the like public figure status of these characters, and that they are performing for people as entertainers, while also kind of highlighting the internal trauma going on inside of them. And I think that's beautifully done.
Absolutely.
Even if not every scene throughout the middle is like super, super engaging.
Right.
The picture that it paints overall is just awesome.
Yeah. And by that end sequence, the bookend at the end where we have that also, that's where it really clicked together with me. Like they're all different. They approach this differently. They're all kind of unified by this urge to do this thing that as it's described early in the movie, like they're basically strapping themselves to a coffin, and it's just like it's so beautiful. It's so damn good. So I'm glad.
Surprisingly brutal too.
Yes. Oh,
in the violence. So.
Oh, absolutely.
Highly recommend.
Me too.
And I'm glad you checked it out.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to watch one movie that you rated 5 stars, and then you talked about Grand Prix, and I was like, oh, I'll watch Grand Prix instead.
Yeah.
So I'll keep the 5-star movie in my back pocket for another time. But yeah, did you have another thing for Potpourri?
Yeah, there was an interesting one I watched recently that I'll just bring up because I know you have watched it. Ooh. And maybe we relate on some of our feelings about it. Okay. Per the kind of constant evergreen recommendation of our friend Sam Watermeyer, mm-hmm. I watched Happiness.
Interesting. Okay.
Todd Solondz film. Mm-hmm. And I read your review on it and kind of resonated with, it seemed like you appreciated it, but didn't really full on enjoy it, or like
sure.
Really, it didn't all click with you. And I kind of felt that way.
Okay.
I think I liked it more than you did, but it's a little bit like misery porny for my taste.
Yeah.
And I was kind of surprised by that, just with how much praise I've heard for it. I was like, it's got to be a lot more than that.
Right.
And, I'm sure its staunchest defenders would correct me and tell me that it is, but I enjoyed it and I respected it, especially how convicted it is of like portraying these really awful,
right.
depraved, troubled people in a way that is ultimately kind of relatable in a surprising way. And I thought that the acting was all incredible in service of that, in creating right. characters that are like, these are disgusting, deplorable people, but at the same time, like some weird little part of my brain like gets it. Yeah. And I hate that I get it. Like, and so as an exercise in like kind of maybe revealing yourself as you watch it, I thought it was a really cool film. But at the same time, I was kind of like, this to a certain extent feels like gross and miserable for the sake of it. So
yeah,
that was an interesting experience.
It is a very interesting movie that is now available on Criterion. It's such an I'm like looking through my letterbox, and like I rated it 3 stars. I did not heart it because I did not want to be on any watch lists. But it is this weird nugget of normalcy of just. It's like someone took like the monsters of the world, who are capable of like doing the worst things imaginable, and is just showing their daily life. And it's really
like a slice of life movie.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't really know to what end.
Sure.
So it's a very interesting movie. And it's referenced in one of my favorite movies of last year. I like movies. I love movies.
I like movies.
I like movies.
Yeah. I saw that one too and really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I loved that just joke reference to it early on. It was great.
Yeah.
That's Happiness. There's a Criterion edition of it. So
I watched the new 4K Blu-ray.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So to round out Potpourri, I have one thing I want to talk about. Did you have anything else, first of all? Okay.
I'm good.
All right. So to wind down and round out the episode, I have one more Potpourri. It's a documentary on Netflix. I watched it a couple days ago. Jailbreak, Love on the Run. Oh. So this was something that I was pretty interested in because it is a documentary about the jail escape and subsequent manhunt for Casey White, an attempted murderer who was in jail and was broken out by Vicky White, no relation to each other, who had fallen in love with him. She was a decorated like corrections officer for that jail, and she had been there for like almost 20 years, over 20 years, I think. And she decided to break him out of jail, and then went on a manhunt for 11 days. And they were in Alabama, and then the manhunt ended in Evansville, Indiana. Yeah. Shout out to Mike White, and no relation, hopefully. So it ended in Evansville with a car accident, and then spoiler for real life, she died, and he went back to prison. So when this happened in 2022, I was really interested in it. I was like following it along on like TikTok and on the news. And like, so I was interested in seeing this documentary, and I fucking hated the documentary.
Okay.
So much. First, Andy, did you like know about this case? Did you like follow it at all or anything?
I don't know what rock I was living under. I'd never heard of this. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, it was all over the TikToks and everything. So but yeah, I was very much invested in it, and I was very I was curious about it because like the news was like saying like, oh yeah, she worked there for years, and I was just like, wow, I wonder how did like this guy like get her hooks in her? Like, how did this come about? And what this documentary does is it does what I think is an incredibly reckless thing, in that it romanticizes and glamorizes the escape and the manhunt. It is positioning it as like, oh, these two people were just really in love with each other, and she broke him out of jail and went on this manhunt so that he would have like 11 days of freedom and everything, when it's like I took kind of a cheap shot in my Letterboxd review and said that I would have preferred a deeper dive into the psychology of both of them rather than this bizarre glorification for the benefit of the true crime weirdos who eat this stuff up. Because there's like a subset of people who are obsessed with like true crime that like I saw a TikTok that was like that was like someone saying like I would if I was killed and I like someone was making a TikTok about my murder or something, and they were just doing makeup and using words like unalive and other like TikTok things and everything, I would haunt them or something. And I'm like,
yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. It's so obnoxious. But like, this documentary isn't that like, it's to its credit, it is a competently made documentary in terms of like going through the chronology of what happened, showing some fairly interesting new information about like the lead up to it. There's like audio of phone calls where there's a little bit of a salacious nature to it that like, there's like, we hear a little bit of like phone sex that they had. And I'm like, why are we listening? Like, I don't need to hear this. Like, it's not something there, but like, the big thing about it is that like the movie begins with one of the people, like the people that are interviewed in it and have talking heads in it are all like people that she knew and that worked with. And so like, and this is, I hope that this doesn't come across as a cheap shot or anything, but like there's like one of the opening things is like, you know, people think that people from the South are all just like a bunch of rednecks and hillbillies who are just really stupid and don't really engage with society or anything. But the truth is like, we take everything in. We're much smarter than people give us credit for. And then that felt weird because there was none of that in the movie. Like, it didn't explore like the psychology of what drew Vicky White to Casey White. It didn't do that. It was just like, yeah, she was lonely, and you know, she wanted to, like, she fell in love with this guy. It's like, okay, yeah. And then it goes to the point. This is where I was like, yeah, this is a 1-star movie, and I hate it. Is where toward the end, it's like it's trying to recontextualize Casey White, this man who was in jail in a waiting trial, who has now a life sentence for like attempted murder, and he was charged with the indirect murder of her, because I think it was like there was question of a self-inflicted gunshot wound and all that, but he was the cause of it, because you know the only reason she was there was because she broke him out of prison. But it goes through like these mental gymnastics of trying to be like, yeah, I don't think that he like manipulated her or anything. I think that they genuinely loved each other. And this is just a tragic end to this amazing love story. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, are you serious? And like the last thing I'll say about it, it's like the big line at the end of the documentary that I was like, I just rolled my eyes so hard. I was like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. Is like one of her coworkers has a line at the end of the documentary that was like, I loved working with Vicky, and I loved working with her, and like she always said that she wanted to go out with a bang, and I'm proud of her for going out with a bang. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, what are you saying? Like,
yeah, what is the takeaway here?
Yeah. And it's like, it's frustrating because like there's a lot to it that could have been mined for some really interesting like documentary stuff, but like it's just like it's for like the annoying like murderinos who like are more interested in like true crime for like thrills of it rather than the psychology of it. It's really, really annoying.
I mean, from how you're describing it, it sounds like the people who made the film just kind of like wanted a modern Bonnie and Clyde or something.
Yeah.
So they kind of just read that onto these people.
Right.
And fetishized that instead of actually telling, giving a compelling examination of why they did it or something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I definitely relate to that about like, I feel like true crime as a genre gets a bad rep because of the most popular stuff in the genre.
Yes.
Because it's all just kind of, I don't know, like gross sensationalist garbage.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It is that like people that are like, I don't know, it's people that want to expose themselves to like true crime in terms of like the danger of it. I don't know. There's like some aspect to it. There's a whole like thing that we could go into with that kind of the popularization of true crime. But yeah, this was a disaster. I really hated it. But it's on Netflix. It's Jailbreak, Love on the Run. Don't watch it.
Out this year?
It came out I think early 2024. So it's a quick turnaround time. So that's also probably why it sucked. But yeah, I did not like it. That is it for Potpourri, and that's it for the episode. Andy, any parting thoughts? Do you want to tell people once again where they can find you online, since it was over 3.5 hours since you last said that, since I made you wait for it?
Yeah, oddtrilogies.com, or listen to us on any of your major streaming podcast platforms. Look out very soon for Logan's and my kind of dueling top 10s of 2024 and our individual reflection pieces that will be written and published on the site.
Perfect. I can't wait. I admire and enjoy all that you do over there, so I'm very excited for another year of Odd Trilogies. So I'm excited for what you guys put out over there. So but yeah, thank you for helping me kick off 2025 here on the Obsessive Viewer. Yep. That's it for this week's episode. As always, thank you so much for listening, and make sure to follow the show on social media and subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast app. Also check out our other podcasts, Tower Junkies, a Stephen King podcast hosted by Tiny and myself, and Anthology, the Twilight Zone and classic sci-fi hosted by me. Those are going to come back eventually, I'm sure, I promise, but next week here on Obsessive Viewer, we're going to have an episode reviewing Better Man and September 5. That episode is currently available as early access on Patreon for all paid members, so consider signing up for Patreon. But until then, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. And now, enjoy this short clip from a recent Patreon-exclusive episode. For the full episode and more Patreon-exclusive content, sign up at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. I feel like it would have compromised the overall tone of the movie, especially with the aforementioned kind of picturesque town kind of vibe of the movie. And also it kind of would maybe counterbalance or underserve the kind of main conceit of the movie being that it's Hot Frosty. It's a hot dude playing a snowman who comes to life. Now, throughout the movie, Dustin Milligan plays Jack as a wonder-stricken new life in the world, and it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It doesn't have to. It's a fantasy movie. It's fine. But the thing that I kind of kept thinking about was, and I said this in my Letterboxd review, was that Dustin Milligan is very charming in this role. He's very charming. He has this like newfound sense, like the character has this newfound sense of innocence and wonder as he's discovering things, and he doesn't understand how society works and how the world works, and he's learning things by watching TV and watching YouTube videos, and he's excelling at them because he's the perfect guy and perfect person. And so he just has this spring of hope, if you will, in his soul. And it's very charming. It's very witty. It's very, very, played very charmingly by Dustin Milligan. Thank you for listening to the Obsessive Viewer podcast. This episode was produced and edited by me, Matt Hurt. If you have feedback, thoughts on our episodes, or just want to connect, you can email me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. For more information on this show, including a full archive of our episodes and show notes, visit obsessiveviewer.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please give us a follow on social media and subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. Also, consider rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible to help increase our visibility and grow our community. If you want to support the show and get early access to new episodes, as well as a steady stream of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. For information on more podcasts presented by obsessiveviewer.com, visit obsessiveviewer.com/podcasts. Our theme song is A Little Mad Sometimes by As Good As It Gets. For more of their music, check them out on Spotify and at asgoodasitgetsmusic.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Get up to 2 months of free podcasting service with Libsyn. Check out the show notes for your promo code to get started podcasting today.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience and their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's LIBSYN, ads.com today.